the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Dave Bacon, back with us today. His daughter just got done having surgery, and she's doing great. So Tiffany will be back with us as she recovers, gang. But we got David Bacon with us today. We're taking advantage of it. I just got back from Alaska last night, landed at John Wayne Airport, found out I couldn't get a flight out.
Dave, I'm not hearing you now. Don't know if others can, but I'm going to go ahead and do some talking here until we can get you back on. You did warn me that your Starlink out there may have a problem and that I should go ahead and cover for you until you can get back on. So I'll do that. I mean, it sounds like you had a great trip up to Alaska and you hit the ground and kind of hit the ground running, and you just took off, went right back out to sea because you are who you are. And what else would you do? So you told me you're out by Catalina Island now, and I got the feeling you may be out there trying to hunt some of them critters like white sea bass or something like that. And again, that's who you are. That's what you do. And you're in a good place for it. Good time of year for it. And you even mentioned you got a tank of anchovies there too, which I love anchovies. Boy, I've been fishing with those all my life. I know what to do with an anchovy. If you're out there in white sea bass land, you might like to have some squid out there with you, especially live squid. Well, maybe you'll get lucky there. But in the meantime, every critter out there loves to eat anchovies. So I hope you do well. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take you to get back on here. So what I'd like to do is just start talking about a subject that is really important to me and to Tiffany, Captain Tiffany Vague, who Vague Rods, vaguerods.net. She teaches classes on rod building, and she and I worked on charter boat for decades out there. And Dave, you're back. I was just starting to talk about stuff, but let me hand it back to you. I'll talk again when you're ready.
No, go ahead, Dave. Keep it going. Here's what's going on, gang. We're at Catalina, but we're fishing in a spot where we got a big cliff on the right side of the boat. And every time the boat swings, the satellite goes behind the cliff. So when I'm on here, I'll be on here. When I'm not, Dave Bacon's going to keep rolling along here. We got a lot of stuff to talk about, gang, because Dave wants to go over a couple of things about high sticking and stuff with your rod. And then him and I want to talk to you all about cold water and anchovies and how happy we are that there's anchovies in the bait barge. So Dave, why don't you take it for a little bit and talk about what's going on with keeping the rod from high sticking and snapping it so Tiffany has to make them a new one.
Okay, will do. Now, folks like Tiffany and myself and Dave here, we have run boats for an awful long time, and we have watched, I don't know how many people, hundreds of thousands of people fish, and we have seen people do everything imaginable right with a fishing rod, and maybe everything imaginable wrong with a fishing rod. And it's the wrong ones that cost rods, breakage, and lost fish. And so I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about how to relate that to building a rod for someone, because it's a tool. A rod is a tool, you know, for a framer with a hammer. You have to consider what specific job you're doing to pick the tool, and for fishing, you have to consider what specific type of fishing you're doing to have a rod builder like Captain Tiffany Vague build you just the right rod. And one of those things that people with a lot of fishing experience and watching people with rods can do is help understand how you use a rod, and then how to build that rod to kind of help you do what you do, or maybe keep a rod from being damaged if you're doing it differently. And one of the main things I want to talk about in relation to that is how to load up a rod to help you catch a fish, and also how to load up a rod wrong to help you break that rod and lose the fish. Okay, so This thing right out of my garden is my fishing rod for the moment because it's small enough to fit on the screen. And it used to be a flower out here on the end, but I'm sorry, I had to cut that off. It didn't fit on the screen. But I want you to watch this. Okay, I'm at this end. I'm the angler. And over here at this end is a fish, and it's pulling down. You got that? Now see how that rod loads up? That's beautiful. That rod, I'm basically fishing it at 9 o'clock straight out. And it bends downwards. And rods are built to do that. They can take that. Now, what we do is we lift a rod and we reel down. Lift a rod to get line in and reel down. Okay, that's good. That's good. But where things can go wrong is when you start lifting that rod too much. Because see how we've got a lot of good bend right in this area where there's still some good strength left in that rod. When you've got a big fish and you want to win, the closer you can get your load up, get the pressure point on that rod back here where it's at stiffest, the better chance you're going to have with that fish. However, when you end up raising that rod too high, look what happens. Look what happens. You're changing the bend to out here, and when you get that rod up like past 10 o'clock, past 10:30 to 11 o'clock, and I've seen people go to 12 o'clock and beyond, you are now just stressing this part of the rod when you want to be stressing on something heavy, this part of the rod where there's a lot of effort. So we see people lifting rods away like that, and pretty soon the rod can't take it and it just breaks. And they got a broken rod and they think it's something wrong with the rod, and it's generally not something wrong with the rod. The reality here is that's operator error. And you send that back to a factory and they look at it and they know it was operator error. The person that owns your tackle shop that you take it to looks at it and knows it's operator error. And so the reality is you did that one yourself. If you high stick a rod like that and just make it bend like that, rods just aren't made to do that. They need that pressure here. So when you're fishing and you need some strength, don't bring that up past 10:30. Once you come up past about 10:30, you've got no strength left because you're all working this part of the rod that can break. It's the weak point. So bring it up to 10 o'clock, reel it back down, lift up again, because you're doing the lifting with the part of the rod that can take it. It can take that. But once past 10:30, you've lost the strength of that rod and you're putting all the pressure out here where it just can't take it. So guard against that. Now, if you're building rods for people, boy, it helps. You know, for example, Tiffany would build a rod for some of our customers who chartered us on our charter boat. And it was great because she knew exactly how they fished. She would watch people as they fish, and then we talk about it. And she would tell them if they're a high sticker, she would tell them, okay, we need to get you on a little stiffer rod because, you know, I know you like there to be a lot of fun, to have some light action. You want to sling a jig a long ways, but at the same time, when you high stick the rod where you're talking about, it's liable to break. So let's put you on a stick with a little slower action, a little stronger up here, and you will do much better. You'll catch fish and you'll keep from breaking a rod, and it'll just be all better for you. So as a rod builder out there, just think, try and talk to the person, have them show you, hand them a rod, do the bend on the other end for that person, have them show you, ask them, how do you fight a fish? I'm going to be the fish. I'm going to hold the other end of the rod. You do what you do and show me how you fight that. And you watch them to see how high up they bring that stick. And if they bring it high, then they need a stronger tip out here because they're probably going to break a quicker action. So those are some of the things that you can really learn how to help people with in terms of catching fish. There are so many aspects to being a good rod builder, and trying to understand something about your customer is of the utmost importance. Utmost importance. It's kind of a matter of, you want to know, okay, what are you going to do? Somebody would come in and ask Tiffany, can you build me a rod for yo-yoing for yellowtail? And she'd know exactly what to do. Or they'd say, okay, I'm going to be casting a bait to kelp patties for Dorado and yellowtail. Build me a rod for that. She'd know what to do. Or I'm deep baiting, chunk baiting for tuna, or whatever they come in and want a rod for, she would know what to do. But if 3 people came in and asked for this and told her they were going to do the same thing, by the time she was done talking with them, she might build 3 different rods, slightly different rods. And therefore, and the reason for that is because they all fish differently. And much of that has to do with how high up they bring that rod when they're fighting a fish. Too high, you need a stiffer rod. You think of a rail rod that's leaning against the rail and it's bending down like that. That's good. A lot of that pressure is up here. But when they start to lift that rod, if they lift it too high, it's just being awful on the rod. So that's for rod builders. For rod users, it's kind of the other side of the same coin. What you want to do is get the most out of your rod and make sure you don't damage it, make sure you don't lose that fish of a lifetime. That's what we want to catch. So my message here for you is 9 o'clock gives you so much power. I will often fish with the rod tip when I've got a fish on, rod tip near the surface. So my rod is actually like 8 o'clock. And then I'll lift it up a little past 9 o'clock, maybe 9:30. And then I'll reel back down because, man, I'm using the strength of the rod. Keep it down low when you need a lot of power from your rod. Keep it down low. Bringing it up high only hurt you. Only hurt you. So keep it low when you need power. When that rod breaks, you're in a world of hurt there. There isn't just a whole lot you can do about it, except, I don't want to advise you to grab the line and try and hand line it in because, a braided line, if you're using it, that can go right through your hands. You better have some gloves on at least. But you're probably just going to fight it with a shorter stick while that broken part is doing whatever it's doing on the line. But that's kind of how you go about working that rod. Just remember, lower angle, more power. Higher angle, really, you've lost all your power, and the very end of the rod has to do the work, and that's the weakest part. So keep that rod low. When you're casting, here's a little different situation, because now you're going to have your rod up behind you, and you're going to be casting, and you're going to, what are you going to do? I wish we had time to put on an additional talk, and maybe I'll come back on and we'll do this one, because I can show you some tricks that will really enhance your casting and put that bait or that lure or swim bait out there further than you can imagine. But my point here for this talk is that your rod is high. Behind you, you're casting, you're going to load that rod up as much as you can. And that is going to be that upper part of the rod up here. And that has to be. So if you're going to cast a rod, you need a rod built for the lure or bait, basically the weight of what you're going to be casting. And so many rods come with a message on there or words about how heavy a weight it can throw, and that's what you want to go by. If you're going to try and toss a 4-ounce jig out there and just walk it across the water, a good kicking jig, something like that, if it's a 4-ouncer, well, you better have a rod that can handle a 4-ouncer. That's probably going to be 20 to 40 pound stick, 30 pound at the lightest, because if you're a good caster, you can put a tremendous amount of load up on that rod. This is kind of the opposite of what we're talking about when you have a fish on. Because now casting, like I said, your rod is very high in the water, okay? Very high, or high in the air. And you're casting, and then once it's out there and hits, then I want you to keep your rod low. Let it hit the water, and then you can work with it. Now, if you're, say, a bass fisherman, let's say you're fishing a calico bass on the surface in a kelp bed, or you're a freshwater bass fisher and you're fishing the shoreline or structure, weeds, whatever you got, then what I like to do to help the rod and to help with my timing is I cast over my right shoulder. I'm right-handed, okay? And that's fine for me. Actually, a lot of left-handed people will cast over their right shoulder too. And so when I'm working with someone about what rod and reel combination is good for them, I like to ask them questions like, which shoulder do you cast over? For fishing where I'm going to do a lot of casting today, let's say swim baits for calico bass in the boiler rocks or at the kelp, I'm going to take a light stick and I'm going to put conventional stick, and I'm going to put a round bait cast reel on it or low profile, either one. And I'm going to get a left-handed reel. I told you, I'm right-handed. So normally I would put a right-handed reel on there, and look at this. I would cast, this hand moves up here, this hand moves to the handle, and I'm reeling in the slack. Make sure it's ready for a bass. But if I've got a left-handed reel on that, look at this productivity change. I now cast, and instead of changing hands, I cast and I just start turning the handle. I save a hand change on every single cast. And because I do that, that means I'm going to make 100 extra casts today, because I've saved myself that many seconds on each cast, and I'm going to catch a whole bunch more fish. Those productivity matters or issues matter a lot to you. And then how to put all of that together. Remember that when you're casting, you're asking one thing of your rod. You're asking a lot of the tip of your rod, because that is what has to load up and then deliver out there a long ways. It's all about the tip of your rod. Now you got to match your rod to the lure you're going to use, the weight of it, or the bait size that you're going to use, and make it so that the rod tip can handle all of that weight. But once it's out there, when it hits the water, you want the slack gone immediately. So you're going to, as you cast, you're going to feather down with your thumb just slightly so that you're not detracting from the cast, but you're keeping the line fairly taut as it drops down so that there isn't very much slack when it actually hits the water. And because when it hits the water, there may be an immediate boil on it. You may have a bass just inhale it, or bass or yellowtail or dorado or tuna or anything else. And it may be instantaneous. You want to be ready for that. And so feather that slightly when you're casting so that it hits the water without a lot of slack. And then, and then also, if you can get comfortable with it, put a left-handed reel on there so that you can cast from your right shoulder and just be immediately turning as soon as it gets there, so that you minimize that time with any slack at all. Because slack is your enemy. That does not help you catch fish. Just a reality of it. So once you're out there and it's fishing, now, if you're fishing near the surface and you get bit near the surface, your tendency is to want to lift that rod really high. And I'm going to use a pencil here for a rod. You've cast and you're fishing kind of straight out on the surface. You get bit. Your tendency is to want to crank that rod up really high and reel real fast. Hard on the rod. Do it the other way around. When calico fishing, for example, and also casting for other fish, like I mentioned, the dorado, the yellowtail, the tuna, whatever. When a fish picks me up, the first thing I want to do, and what I coach people to do on the boat all the time, is reel. That's what you do first. Get that slack, taut that line, and then you can do that hook set. But without that taut line, your rod doesn't have the power to hook set, and you're trying to raise the rod too high to where this part up here still doesn't have the power to do any of that anyway. And so you really need to reel first and then lift the rod once the line is taut, because then you don't have to lift the rod as high and you're using this powerful part here. Okay, somebody just put a good question up there. Where's Tiffany? Okay, Tiffany just had a lower back operation yesterday morning, and she's still in the hospital. When you run a boat, when you function as the deckhand on a six-pack boat, and you have this love for wrestling sharks, as she has always done, it's her favorite thing to do, wrestle sharks on the deck, then things happen to your lower back. And so she was to where she could wrap rods, but she could hardly walk. And so she got the operation. And we heard that the operation is really a good success, and she's coming out of it okay. She did her first physical therapy, which I thought was going to be torture dungeon, but she said, no, it wasn't too bad. She's on the mend. And Dave, you're back online. Well, you were. Then you froze again. You must be in one of those places along there where you just don't have direct line of sight to whatever satellite you're trying to use for communication there. But that's okay. As long as the folks will put up with me, I'll be happy to talk about fishing rods and fishing and anything else. We're doing fine on time. We got plenty of that. I know you got some things that you want the two of us to talk about. And I'm looking forward to you being back on there in order to do that. But back to Tiffany. She is recuperating now. She'll be back to, if I know her, she's going to be back to building rods within days when it should be weeks. But she'll get there. And in the meantime, she's got her laptop in the hospital, as you can imagine. If you know Tiffany, of course she does. And her phone, and she's still doing business with a website. And of course, her website is vaguerods.net. You know why we use .net in that website? It's because we use nets in fishing. Made perfect sense. So it's vaguerods.net. And right now she's got a extended Father's Day sale going on with the best prices on blanks and rod building components, I think, that you will find absolutely anywhere. So encourage you all to go wish her well on there and do some shopping and see if you can find some things that you'll enjoy for rod building purposes. For rod building purposes, just want you to think, if you build your own rods, great. I still want you to think. Don't get that part wrong. If you have somebody else build your rods, I still want you to think. I want you to think before you talk to that rod builder, because ideally you want that rod builder to just to just give you the rod that's going to make your fishing dreams come true. And the reality is, the more information your rod builder has to work with, the better job they can do with that. And if you're one that builds your own rods, well, then that communication is still important. But what happens is you got to be honest with yourself. How do you fish it? How do you cast? Once you got a fish on, how do you treat that rod? Be thinking about those things, because that thought process and that information needs to go into the rod building itself. Super important, because too little information can result in a perfectly wonderful rod, maybe for somebody else. Okay. But you want a perfect rod for yourself. So be as honest with yourself if you're building it, and be as honest with your rod builder if a rod builder is building it as you possibly can. And talk to them about how you cast. Talk to them about how you fight a fish. Have them hold the end of that rod while you show them how you fight a fish. Give them information that will help them. Let me ask a question about Dave in Alaska. And, well, I wish he could be here right now to tell you about it, but I know just a little bit about what he was doing up there. He had moments up there, like he was telling me about this nice big lingcod he had on. And then the rod bent absolutely double after that. And they fought this thing for a good long time. And what happened? That lingcod that he hooked up was still on there, but there was a 60-pound lingcod hitchhiking on that one. Can you imagine a 60-pound lingcod hitchhiking on another lingcod that you'd be proud to catch and have? I mean, that's one of those moments in fishing that is just it. It's a defining moment. Okay. And then I understand they released them both because, well, one lingcod, and it's got to be in a slot up there. Both of those lingcods were too big for that slot. So that one didn't get to be kept. But I understand that he had an excellent time up there and went out and caught a lot of fun fish. And some of the eating fish that you can keep up there he was talking about were Johnny bass. And the water's loaded with them up there, kind of in their preferred depth range. And you can go there with light tackle, like take your bass tackle and go up there and catch these things and just have a hoot and a holler, and it'll be fun. And when Dave can come back on, I'm sure he'll be plenty happy to tell you absolutely all about that. And, you know, while he was up there, I'm sure he did some other kinds of fishing as well. Right now, however, he is off of Catalina someplace. And if I know Dave, he's out there setting things up to put the boat in the right position, get in a position where he thinks there's fish. And, you know, then you need to set up a chum line, and you need to get your rod rigs out, and you need to have everything set up, probably some for jig, probably some for bait, probably some for any other fun or foolhardy thing he wants to try. Well, we do like to experiment. It's fun. And then spend his time doing that. The issue is that where he's at, in order to find all these fish, he's having great trouble getting access and being able to join us here. He comes back on periodically, but so far, not for very long. We did have a little better luck right before the show. He was on there for, I don't know, 10 minutes. And we were talking about where he was up in Alaska and what he's doing right now. And I got a feeling he'll come out of this okay. And maybe he'll come back on and do that and tell us about it. Or maybe he'll tell us about it next week.
Hey, David, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, Dave doesn't have any signal. I just spoke to him on the telephone, so he might not be able to jump back on. So just if you want to wrap up or just finish, a topic or something, and then we'll just end the show. Unfortunately, Dave won't make it back.
Okay, no worries. Well, we've got a little while left, so if it's all right with you, I'll just
You can carry on if you want, and I can end it. Yeah, no problem. I'm right here.
okay. Yeah, that will do.
All right.
So I was able to hear him at least a little bit,
Right.
and he said, "Keep going, tell folks stuff."
Yes.
So
Yes.
tell folks stuff will do. But I'm going to change gears here a little bit because Dave and I were talking about something at the beginning, and he and I have both run boats and fished our whole lives here on Southern and Central California coast and many other places as well. But this is where we spent most of our professional time and maybe growing up time. And, we have changes of regimes in the water. And right now, what we've got going on is kind of a cold water regime. And it's not too long since we had El Nino going, warm water regime, and man, we were out chasing all kinds of things. Of course, the Dorado and the yellowtail and tuna and all of that. It didn't have to go all that far to start looking for wahoo and different things. But now things are a little bit different, at least for right now. We'll see what midsummer brings, but for right now, we're looking a little cold water scenario along our coast and out at the Channel Islands. So he and I have both run boats for many years and had people come aboard, and they give us their wish list. I'll always remember running groups of people out of one of the really fancy hotels here in Santa Barbara. And I remember one day about noon when the hotel called me up and said, "Hey, we've got a group that wants to go out fishing." And I'm down at the boat actually, and I'm looking out and I'm going, well, okay, when are they planning on going? It's blowing about 25 knots all the way to the beach right now. And they said, well, they want to go right now. And I said, okay, but warn them first that we're not going to be able to go very far out, and because it's building, it's going to get worse. So we have to fish like right outside the harbor. We'll do the best we can. If they're okay with that, send them on down. They said, we'll put them in our vehicle. We'll have them down there. So these four guys show up, jump on the boat in Santa Barbara. By now, it's an hour later when they get there. The wind is up higher and white caps all the way to the beach. And they said, okay, can we go get some billfish? And I said, well, not today, not here. And it's just blowing too hard to go out very far. And they said, okay, well, look, one tuna a piece would make us happy. Can we do that? So then I had to launch into what I call expectation management. And by the time we had things down to a calico bass from a local kelp bed, well, then we had something to work with. So whatever conditions you have, whether it be wind, whether it be cold water, whether it be what bait is available or none available, you have to match. You have to do the expectation management, even if it's on yourself. And frequently, of course, it is. So be realistic about what you can go out for today. Problem is, you've been talking to your buddies, and for weeks now, you've had this trip planned. Man, it's all about we want to go out and catch some yellowtail today. And then the day comes, and the water's really cold. There's not much available in the way of bait, and things are just different. If you want to go stick with your original plan, just prepared that you may come back without catching anything. And that's okay, because fishing ain't exactly 100% all about fish anyway. Just going out there and having the experience. But what we suggest you do is read the conditions. If you've got a professional captain with you, she or he will know how to do that. Read the conditions, look at the charts, look at buoy observations, and check with people you know, and put together a plan of action. And that plan of action, be realistic, is probably gonna require some changes. And that change may mean, well, folks, we're going rock fishing today is what we're gonna do. Because if everybody on the boat just has a mindset of one particular fish, you can go out there, and if you don't catch any of those fish, hey, at least you tried. And that's a good plan for the day. But if there's a bunch of people at home waiting for a barbecue or something like that, which is the case I find often, then you need to change plans. Sometimes even the bass aren't going to like the cooler water. Maybe don't have very good bait. Dave Hansen is out there at Catalina Island right now with a tank full of, 4-inch nice green anchovies. That's making me happy. I love it when my bait tank is full of 4-inch anchovies. Good stuff. But whatever your situation is, plan accordingly. Change your game plan. Always be willing to change your game plan. That's one of the things that folks like Dave Hansen and I and Tiffany have learned how to do over years of running boats, and just having that responsibility of putting people on fish, is knowing when to tell them, hey folks, we got to be realists here. It's time to make a change. It's time to make a change. If catching fish today is important to you, we need to abandon that plan of kelp patty hopping or something like that, or going out and chunking baits for tuna or trolling for thresher shark or trolling for billfish or whatever that original plan was. And we want to take some fish home. So you take your rods and you cut off those fancy terminal riggings, and you set up with something like a simple dropper loop. And then you drop down, go find a structure spot, you drop down, catch some rockfish, and go home with some meat for the family. Perfectly okay to do that. Absolutely perfectly okay. Because for most folks, the goal of a day of fishing is catching fish. Sometimes you can catch rockfish pretty easy. And sometimes you go, okay, we'll go do that. Okay, well, that took 2.5 hours. Now we've got our limits of rockfish. So what else can we do? Now think about something different, like, hey, well, let's go back right outside a harbor, or depending on where you're at, someplace else nearby, and drift in the shallows with this nice bait we got. See if we can finish the day picking up some halibut. If you happen to have a situation like you're ending the day near a high tide, well, that's a perfect plan. You would go back near the harbor where it's only going to take you, 15 minutes to get back into the harbor. And so you go back near there and you try some drifts. Now it's in the afternoon. There's probably a breeze come up. You've got some drift capability there. You'll cover some ground. So you do a rig like this. First, you opt for medium size rods, smaller reels. You're going to go with like a 20 to 30 pound rod, maybe 20 to 40. And you're going to make sure you have some fluorocarbon. Take one of those little slider things. Wish I had one on my desk right here to show you, but it's a hollow tube with a snap hanging from it. Put your line through that, hang a little weight from that snap, tie onto a swivel, and then about 18 to 24 inches of fluorocarbon leader, because you're fooling the fish with this part. and a small treble hook. And I underscore that, small treble hook. Dave Hansen out there right now with 4-inch anchovies in his tank has the perfect situation for this. If he can pull into some place where nice, shallow, sandy bottom, he could finish the day for halibut and maybe end on a really high note, a happy note, high fives. Halibut cause high fives. And in that scenario, matching the hook to that bait is critically important. So in that scenario, I'm using a treble hook, but a small treble hook in like maybe size 5, 3 to 5, small. And that's not 3/0. That's 3 small hooks. And then I'm going to take that anchovy, let's say that's the anchovy and that's the head. I'm going to put that hook from the top and I'm going to hook that anchovy with one of the points of that treble hook on the top of the nose in front of the eyes. And the reason I do it that way is because, one, you're dragging along the bottom. Here's the seafloor. And if that hook is on the top, it tends not to get hung up on the seafloor and rocks and weeds and stuff quite as much. And the other thing is, when it's drifting along, coming up off the bottom, well, the halibut are laying on the seafloor. And this is kind of coming over the halibut. Halibut look up, and they may not have the most acute eyesight, but I prefer that they didn't see the hook, just in case I'm going over that one halibut that does have really acute eyesight. So with the hook on top of the head like that, then the halibut isn't going to see it. It's going to stay out of trouble in general with rocks and weeds and sand on the bottom. And I'm going to have the best bait presentation for as long a time as possible. I'm going to have a good situation for what the halibut sees as he's looking up, going across the top. And all of that comes together to create the greatest opportunity for that halibut to blast up off the bottom, bite my bait. That's what we like to see. Now, when that halibut does that, okay, that's what we're after. That's what we want to have happen. And what I want you to do is do not react wildly like you think you just hooked into a big old tuna or something like that. Halibut are funny critters. I want you to, when you feel that bite, I want you to let out a little bit of line. Just have your thumb on there, or if you're fishing with a spinning reel, hold that line and just let a little bit out to let that halibut hold it in its mouth and turn it around and get that bait fully inside of its mouth. And then you put it in gear and you just let it kind of take that line taut, and then you just kind of do like that. I didn't do anything major. It was just a small hook set, because those small treble hooks that I were talking about are amazingly sharp, and the barbs aren't all that big, which means that it's going to drive into the halibut's mouth past the barb without much of any hook set at all. Frequently, it's just reeling taut will do it. But yeah, just not much of a hook set. Then I want you to have that drag set softly, because halibut have soft spots in their mouths. We don't want to pull a hook out. And they're generally not going to swim into kelp beds or under rocks and things like that. So you don't have to worry about making sure that you stop them before they do any run. So let them have a little bit of run. And then you bring that thing in and try and keep that animal as docile as possible. Because when you get that halibut up to the surface and it sees how cute you are, it will try and leave violently, because it doesn't think you're all that cute. And at that point, really, you don't have enough line out to have much stretch. And so really it's just the bend in your rod that's all that's keeping from pulling out of that fish's mouth. And that's the one thing you don't want to do. You don't want to lose that halibut, and you especially don't want to lose that halibut when it's already at the surface and you see how delicious it is. It hurts to lose one at that point. So somebody's asking, where's Dave? Good question. Where's Dave? Dave is out at Catalina Island fishing, doing something important, and he's trying to be here. And if I know him, he's still right now trying to be here. But there seems to be some problems with linking up, like with Starlink. And it may be he's near some cliffs, something like that, and just doesn't have a straight shot at it. So that signal is kind of bending over structure, which it only does so well. And so he just can't be here at the moment. But if he can get that going again and get back before we wrap up shop here, well, he can come back in and say goodbye to us and end what he's talking about. But besides the rod building and the not high sticking the rod and how to work that rod to your benefit instead of the fish's benefit, or breaking the rod, he did want to talk a little bit about how we change game plans in order to give people the best chance possible to catch fish, no matter what happens to us out there under changing conditions. And that's important. So we talked a little bit about how to change game plans and how to do something at the end that can, maybe you went out and maybe you change your game plan from going chasing kelp patties to, okay, we're going to go catch some rockfish today to get some fish for the family. And then you're going to try and do something towards the end after you catch the rockfish, because no sense going home early if you don't have to. We prefer being out on the water. So halibut was one option. There's more. You can also go into a kelp bed where frequently that moderates the waves a little bit if the wind has come up. Or if you're at an island, like Dave Hansen is at a Catalina Island right now. I have fished a lot of the Channel Islands, the Northern Channel Islands, Anacapa, Santa Cruz, Santa Rosa, San Miguel. And there's a lot of places there where you can kind of tuck in away from the wind, but you can be near like boiler rocks. And boiler rocks are maybe my absolute favorite thing to do of all, because I'm in a place where there's these huge cliffs just falling right down to the sea, and the big waves crashing up against these rocks. That's why we call them boiler rocks. The water's just boiling over them. And in that environment, calicos move into there because that water, that turbulent water, is dislodging food, and any smaller fish that are in there just aren't quite as in control of themselves as they used to be. Usually are, because they've got all that turbulent water happening around them. And so you're casting swim baits in there. And those fish that are in there that live in that environment and act in that environment, those bass are stronger than, say, bass that hang around at the kelp and whatnot, because they got to be. They're fighting against that turbulent water all the time. They're so strong, they're so mean. I call them junkyard bass. That's my name for the calico bass that I catch out at the boiler rocks. Those are my junkyard bass, and it is the most fun. And let me tell you, if you got a boat or a friend with a boat, or hire a six-pack boat or a big boat, if you can talk them into going and fishing those boiler rocks like that, it will be a super memorable time for anybody that you bring along. Like, just friends, coworkers, customers. Take a customer out there. They'll love that. Or, your relatives, that cousin from Nebraska or whatever, because that scenario that scenario by the Boiler Rocks is just one of the most stunning, gorgeous fishing opportunities you can ever ask for. It's literally like breathtaking, and people will remember that for a lifetime. If you're taking family out there 30 years from now, when you're at a family dinner, Thanksgiving or whatever, it's going to be a topic of conversation, even if the fishing wasn't that good. But frequently the fishing can be very good. So Boiler Rock bassing is another thing that when we have a cooler water regime, the bass are still in the same general area, and you can frequently still go find them. So that's another good thing to do in a colder water regime, when the big fancy game fish, those surface sizzlers, just aren't quite available. You can do something like go into the kelp beds. Now, remember I was saying earlier that fishing isn't always totally 100% about fish. When you're changing game plans, also consider non-fishing things. For example, you're blasting across the channel, say, and or you're just going out to a rockfish spot and you see a pod of dolphins. Okay, if you go out fishing all the time, you see pods of dolphin kind of all the time. But please remember that a lot of people that you take out there, they don't. And to them, this is like a big thing. This is super cool. Sometimes you'll go out there and you'll see whales. And I mentioned Boiler Rock bassing, like out at the Northern Channel Islands. There are some places where I go Boiler Rock bassing, and like half a mile away, there's like blue whales or humpback whales or gray whales cruising by. And depending on where the group of people is from, I always try and remember that. I want to give them a good day of fishing, but I want to give them a good day in general. I want to give them a memorable day. And seeing those things like that just really adds to the memorabilia. So if you have your own boat, or you have a friend with a boat, and you're out there fishing all the time, you're used to seeing that, you might be tempted to just kind of cruise on past. Jeff just put in a comment, or pot of orcas. Yeah, perfect. And that's important to people. And, he mentioned a pot of orcas. I recall one time I was doing exactly this thing. I was Boiler Rock bassing. And I had a group of people who were coming back across the channel from Santa Cruz Island back to Santa Barbara. And I see something out ahead, quite a ways out there. And I'm looking at it, and that looks sort of funny. What's that? As I start getting a little closer, I realize that is an orca, kind of a big one. And as we get a little closer, I see other splashes. And what it turned out was a mama orca with two youngsters, two babies. They were like about dolphin size. And that was so fun, because now that's a powerful predator. She's the boss. Okay. So I stopped like about 150 yards out and just held real still. And as I was approaching, her babies were just frolicking on the surface like kids, and she kind of moved towards me as I approached. I stopped well back, just sat there, let her calm down a bit. And then I turned and I just started doing this very slow, just idle speed circle about 150 yards out from her. Nothing spooky, no spooky movements. And at first she moved around in that circle and stayed between me and her kids. But after a while, she settled down and put up with us. And we got to sit there and watch that show for like 20 minutes. And then finally, she decided it was time. She slapped her tail. The kids went down, and I said, "We're out of here, folks. Mama says it's time to go." And so I fired it up and we took off. But moments like that particular charter group, they remembered that. And whenever I talk to that group or anyone in that group, to this day, they still talk about that. And that was many years ago. That's how important these memories can be. So just remember that it's not entirely always about fishing. And I was looking at the time here because we're running out of time. So, I want to thank Dave for the opportunity of being here and talking with you. He and I had planned on doing this together, and he's always so much fun to talk to. And many of you folks listen to Dave, his podcast all the time, and that's like the best thing to do because he's a wealth of knowledge and he's got the right attitudes about things. And I really appreciate that man, and I appreciate his whole family, all good people. And I want to thank you for listening to me, because his technical issues today just kind of gave me an opportunity to hang out here with you for about an hour and just talk about all this stuff. And any of you that know me know that it isn't very hard to get me to talk about fishing. And so we were able to go with the topics I had in mind today. So listen to Dave's podcast all the time, and remember to check out what Tiffany's doing. Again, she just had a back operation yesterday. She's healing up fine. The operation went well. She's starting physical therapy, and she'll be back to wrapping rods real fast knowing her. And go check out her website. She teaches rod building, beginning, intermediate, and advanced classes. These are online classes, very inexpensive. And then she's got on her website, vaguerods.net, she's got absolutely the best prices that you will find, I think, anywhere, absolutely anywhere, on everything that you need, the blanks, the components, and everything else. So I'm going to say, Dave Hansen, thank you for this opportunity. And everyone watching, thanks for putting up with me for an hour. And I'll look to be back on here again. So thank you, and have a good day. Time to go fishing.